Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to take a look at a prototype of Iron Thunder. Now this is a very accessible World War II combat game coming to Kickstarter soon. In this video we'll take a quick look at the components, show some of the key mechanics, demonstrate some of the gameplay, and then finish up with some overall impressions. I've had a couple of chances to play this game two-player now, and I've been very impressed with the gameplay. Let's jump in and get started. We got a lot of ground to cover. Let's start out with a super quick unboxing, keeping in mind that we all want to be wearing our prototype hats. Now, one thing, this two-player version that we've got has US and German forces, as pictured on the cover. Two-player game with one side taking the German forces and the other side taking the US forces. One of the things I want to show quickly here is the rule book. It's 31 pages. When I first started kind of exploring the game, I wondered, my first thought, was this going to be kind of a shallower game? Maybe with not a lot of depth to it, but 31-page rule book, a lot of unique and interesting mechanics, and I can pleasantly say that the depth of this game has been a big plus, a big surprise to me, and one thing that I've enjoyed a lot as we've played through the game. So a lot of things here. Again, this is a prototype rulebook. Some things will change between now and the time it gets to Kickstarter. Another cool thing about the game, minis. Each side has 4 armored units, 4 tanks. We're taking a look at the Tiger now with movable turrets. Again, prototype hats on because you want to take a look at the Kickstarter to see what the final versions look like. Here's the US Sherman. And each one of these 4 tanks has unique characteristics. However, they match up. For example, the M6, I believe it is right here, matches up and has the same characteristics of the Tiger. So as you're playing, you've got kind of a very chess-like feel to this where both sides are evenly matched. And the way this is explained from a design standpoint, it's an abstraction that's going to say that these represent a number of tanks in reality, even though the game has a tactical feel to it as you play through, especially with the armored units. Infantry as well, each side has 8 infantry units, and it would be a mistake to dismiss this game as a game of armored combat. Infantry is quite powerful if you can get them in the right positions. Then some flags to mark moved units in a turn, and we'll talk about that as we take a look at gameplay. So again, prototype hats on though, because these are the prototype versions. We will see the final versions as things get to Kickstarter. Here, take a look at some of these cards. Each side has 4 data cards for their armored units. Again, not super complex, right? But there's a front armor, a side armor, and then each unit has the same rear armor. They have movement, gasoline consumption, ammo consumption needs. Units get experience. They have a strength point. And again, if we look at the Tiger, for example, and this M6, they're going to match up. The data is very much alike. So again, it creates this chess-like experience where both sides are perfectly evenly balanced as you start the battle. So 1 for each of the 4 units on each side. Let's take a look now. Here's some, let's just pull these out as we can. This surprised me a lot about the game. So there are 3 different types of markers here, and I'll show close-ups of these again. There's a big bag of them here. These are your production markers because there is an industrial kind of operational level, industrial production capacity element of the game. And we'll take a look at how that plays. These 3 markers, the ammo, gas, and the production, the lightning bolt symbolizes the production values. And so you're constantly trying to keep your armored tanks in fuel and in ammo and keep your production up in order to fuel your war machine. If you ignore that or put those things in a bad position, it can really compromise your gameplay. These things here, we have 3 very prototype dice. The developer said, make sure you let people know these dice are prototype dice. They're going to look a lot better. These actually struggle a little bit in this, but they're going to be much, much better in the final version. And then we have 4 dice actually, some red markers and stuff to kind of mark the elements on the armored unit cards and other places in the game. Now we'll take a look at the maps momentarily. The map is very unique. Okay, so it has an octagonal, square-based map, which you'll have to kind of see, and we'll show that as we go forward. These are various elements that the players drop on the game board as you start up to change the nature of a few of the hexes. Now there are 2 game boards really with the game. One is a snow field, and the other is a kind of a wooded area, not snowy. You've got these markers that go on the forested kind of the non-snow board, and then you've got these markers that flipped over that you use on the snow element. So you can choose to play your game in either a snow field, a wintry environment, or a normal kind of standard weather terrain. Also, each side has headquarters units, the headquarter base, those go there, and then 3 production facilities. So you've got, and these are flipped over depending on which kind of game mode you're playing in. This is basically a factory that produces either fuel or kind of production elements, and then you have your oil refineries, and then lastly this base that produces production elements as well. So you've got to guard those. Those are very important to guard. We'll take a look at those. Also, so again, I think you might be starting to get an idea of the depth behind the game here. A card deck. This card deck, each side has 3 cards, and you can produce these with your industry as well. Playing these at the right time can really change the nature of a battle. A lot of different variety to create some kind of unique elements in the game. So no 2 game is going to play out the same way, as those cards can influence play quite a bit. Now this over here is your production mat. Each side, so German and Allied, German and US, gets a production mat. This is where you control the flow of your industrial resources as they come in, and then the output. So each turn there's an input and an output phase where you're shifting the things that you've produced up to your armored units and kind of adding forces to the board, and then you're also bringing in the ones that your industry has produced in that particular turn. Let's take a quick look at the map, and I want to show here a close-up of this. I'll unfold it here, but I'll show a distant view of it, because one of the cool things about this game that I haven't seen any point before is its unique shape. So take a look at the units here. We've got octagonals, 1, 2, 3, 4 sides, and then there's squares that sit in the middle there, in between them. Armored units stay in these larger hexes. Infantry units go into the smaller ones as well as the larger one, but you can put a larger formation in these larger octagonal hexes as infantry too. So it creates some very unique gameplay, and it works. It works, I think, really well. And I've not seen a game use this type of map before. If you've seen this, let me know down in the comments down below. I want to flip over as well, and I'll just kind of show a kind of a distant view of part of this, but I'll show a remove. Here is the snow map that you can see creates that second mode of gameplay. So some more kind of variety to the game here. So now with that, we've taken a look at all of the components in the game. That should give you a rough idea of gameplay. Let's go in and talk in detail about some of the mechanics. So as we start out to talk about mechanics, I want to show what the gameplay looks like right at the start. And the tactics and the strategy and the thinking behind this game start before you even set up, because the setup itself is kind of an alternating pattern of putting things down on the board so that you're kind of constantly reacting to what your opponent does as you place things and as you put them in play. And roughly speaking, what happens first is the bases. So here we can see the Germans are to our right. They've put their base down here, and they've got their production facilities up towards the far end of the map. US player has a central base here on the left with production facilities scattered on both sides of it. And there's restrictions as to where you can place things when you're setting up, but roughly one side places all their factories and their base. Then you go to the next side that places their factory and the base. Then whichever side places their factories and bases last places the next part, which are these terrain tiles down here. You place those second, and then likewise you go back and forth when you're going to place all your units. And there's restrictions as to where you can place these production facilities that we can see here, where you can place your units. They have to be within 2 large square hexes of the base, and so on and so forth. But what I've done now is I've kind of set the Germans up with kind of an off-center base, and their strategy is going to try to loop around here to punch through and perhaps get a quick knockout on the US base. So I put their Chaffee, not their Chaffee tank, their Panzer II tank, which is a fast mobile tank, supported here by the Panther. They're going to try to push out here. US set up after them. They've got their M6, their larger tank, to defend against any kind of a push from German forces over here, because they've got some infantry position to come right down the side. So there's a lot of thinking, and then again some lighter, faster forces that perhaps, if they have some success against these German forces pushing out, could drive into their industrial heartland over here at the far end of the map and take them out. So there's kind of some of the thinking that you're looking at with the game setup. So let's talk a little bit about gameplay. Now there's 3 versions of the game, and the one we're looking at now, the US is going to try to knock out the German base. Germans are going to try to knock out the US base. And kind of the basic strategic thinking is you can either blow apart the enemy units to try to work your way through to the base, maybe sneak some units around to get to the base, or perhaps even reduce production capacity so that the enemy's armor can't produce ammo and fuel, and you can reduce and get around the units that way. All of these feel like viable strategies in the game. Gameplay is basically not very complicated. complicated. At the very beginning of a phase, you're going to roll for initiative, and the player that wins the initiative can either elect to go first in that phase or second in that phase. After initiative is determined, you roll for weather, and weather impacts like how much action you can take in a turn and some other elements that might restrict movement and combat in other ways. But once that's taken care of, the side that has the initiative for that particular turn moves one of their units. And each turn, if you would, consists of that unit using up its action points. And action points basically could be to move and to fire, or to move and reload, to turn its turret, to turn its hull. Infantry have 2 action points, so they can move and attack or move twice and things like that. So when it's your turn, you're going to move one unit and act on one unit and expend its action points. Then it goes to the alternate U.S. forces. So the U.S. forces in this case would move one of their units, and each phase usually consists of anywhere from 3 to 6 turns depending upon the weather. So it's going to go back and forth over a series of alternating turns, and then that action part of that phase is done. Then you shift into a resupply phase, and then you lather, rinse, repeat until you get to the end of the game. So it's a pretty fast playing game. I think game length that we've experienced so far, learning game was about 2 hours, next game was about an hour and a half, and the second game was actually much longer than the first game. So I think it's probably, the game box says 45 to 90 minutes, and that feels about right. Let's take a look at our tanks, because this will give us an idea about how a big part of the game plays. So this is the M4 Sherman. This is its unit identifier. It has a black square there, and if we look on the bottom of the mini, we can see a black square to identify that, yep, this is the Sherman, and we're using the right tank. Now, if we look at the central part here, we can see an image of the tank, and it's got a 1 on the front and a 0 on the side. This tells you the front armor is a 1, so if it takes 2 hits from an enemy unit, one of those is going to be negated. It doesn't negate anything from the side, and the units all have an armor of 0 for shots coming in from the rear. Now, on the right-hand side, we can see a lot more characteristics of the unit. 4 tells you how many action points the units have. So heavy armor have action points of 3, lighter armor have 5. This is a mid-range tank, so it has an action point rating of 4. Range of 1, so it can hit units 1 large square ahead that are directly in line with the way the turret is facing. Because the turrets on all the tanks, except for the tank destroyers, rotate. So you kind of know where they're pointing is important, and it takes an action point to rotate a turret. So those are kind of considerations. It got a very tactical feel, as you can see, to the combat here. The yellow indicates the strength of the combat die. There are 3 in the game: yellow, green, and red. Red being the most powerful, yellow being the mid-range one, and then green being the lightest. Now again, these are very prototype dice. So the developers said, don't pay attention to the dice. They're going to be much better in the final version. And I can see that. These look like these were kind of 3D printed for the sake of the prototype. Tanks consume fuel. So we can see a 1 down here in this fuel canister. That means each turn that the Sherman does any type of movement action, it's going to consume 1 fuel. We've loaded it up with 2 fuel canisters at the start of the game, at the start of the battle, so it's going to be able to move 2 turns, so 2 phases. It's got enough to move around until we'd have to refuel it from our production centers. Likewise, tanks consume ammunition. So at the beginning, at the beginning of the game, you have 8 shells and 10 fuel canisters. I've put 2 in each of our 4 US tanks. It's signified being loaded when the shell is on top of the image, and then once it's fired, this is consumed. In order to reload it, you have to spend an action point to bring another shell up into the cannon. So a very tactical level feel to this in terms of production, in terms of kind of combat and firing and things like that. And yet you've got these production elements we can see are built into it, because you've got to keep resupplying your tanks with ammunition and fuel. On the left-hand side, 2 more things. The heart indicates the hit points. Each tank starts with 3 hit points. When it gets to 0, it's destroyed. Likewise, the star is your experience rating. Every time the M4 Sherman kills an enemy unit, it gets 1 rating of 1 kind of star rating. When you get it, each star rating gives it a better chance to hit and do damage with its gun. So there's kind of options on the die that can elevate the strength of it and kind of give you more hits as you go along. So getting units experience and building them up can be really helpful to making a unit much more powerful over the course of your battle. So there's a look at the armor, and hopefully that kind of overview gives you a sense for some of the things that are going on in the game and some of the things that you're kind of playing with as you go through. So let's take a quick look at some of the production centers in the game. This one here, there's 3 different types. This one produces either command points or fuel, has 3 hit points, and this could be captured by enemy forces. You have to have an infantry unit in it in order to be able to hold it. So one of the things we're going to be trying to do early on as either side is get infantry units into these command places, into these centers, so we can start their production up. This one here only produces command points, and if we look up a little bit here, we can see the oil refinery only produces fuel. Likewise, they all have 3 hit points that can be destroyed or captured as the case may be. Let's take a quick look at the production mats here. So the production mats, basically this number up here tells how many units you've got active in the game. So right now each side starts with 8 infantry and 4 tanks. So this number is on 12 for the Germans, and this can get, of course, reduced. Now there's a number of things. You're going to get command points and fuel if you have active production centers that are going to come into the game. And the way it works is these resources get brought in, and you allocate them, and then a turn later, they get pulled out. There's a lot of things you can do with command points. You could spend a command point, for example, to get 2 new cards that you're going to use. You could use 3 command points to replace a tank. You could use 1 command point over here to replace an infantry. This is an extra feature, I think, that may or may not be part of the Kickstarter, so this might change in the final version. I'm not quite sure. Likewise, command points can produce 2 ammo shells, or command point can be used to produce 1 fuel canister. And keep in mind that if you have the refinery, you're going to get a fuel canister anyway. You can also repair your tanks. So here you can use a command point to get a repair token, and you can activate that repair token in the game. So keeping alive those units with experience can be very helpful, because if you have an experienced tank, it can do considerably better and more effective damage in the game. And so you might want to spend those on repair points to be able to build up that tank's strength again. Up the top here, we have these little flag icons. Depending upon the weather, each side's going to have 3 to 6 of these flags per phase, and this indicates how many turns going to be in the phase. So you stack these up at the beginning, and then as you go through the phase, you move one onto the unit that's moved, because each unit can only be activated once per phase. So say, for example, we're down to our last one, we would take this flag, put it next to the unit that just activated to indicate that it can't be used again. Let's not forget cards. The cards add a lot of different twists and subtleties to it. Now these would be hidden from your opponent, and basically each card has kind of the name of the card, an icon representing it, and then an explanation. And then down in the bottom right, a lot of these cards have costs. So we would have to use, for example, a command point to activate this guerrilla tactics card during our turn, which basically says your infantry's next attack against an armored unit does not cause damage, but you can steal as many shells or fuels as damage you would have caused. This could be huge, because a lot of times you're low on resources and you're always trying to scramble for fuel or ammo. So it might benefit you to stripping away the ammo and the fuel from a tank, therefore creating supply problems for your enemy, negating the use of that tank and bringing it into your forces too. And you say you cannot steal a shell that's already loaded, so it's got subtleties there too. Ghost Army here, for example. Armored unit can move back 1 tile after attacking an enemy. This movement costs no AP and no fuel, because oftentimes that you can move up, fire, but then by moving up and fire, you're going to be leaving yourself in range. So to be able to move up, fire, and then escape by pulling yourself back out of range could be a very handy tactic, depending upon how close each unit might be to destruction. So lots of different gameplay variety that come about with the cards, and you're constantly kind of thinking of how can you best and when can you best use this card? Is it worth its cost as well as another consideration? So a lot of subtleties to gameplay that come out with the cards in here as well. That should give us an idea of kind of the core mechanics. Now there's a lot more depth in terms of attacking from the side, movement and things like that. And we'll get to those as we show gameplay. So what I want to do right now is I'm going to play forward a couple turns, then I'm going to come back and we're going to do a whole turn in depth to show how the gameplay works. So we've played forward 2 full phases right now. Another thing that I should mention about this game that I do like is how it plays. You get into the action fast, so we can see this game has developed quite quickly and a lot of stuff has gone on. Let's take a little bit of a look at the map to see what has happened. First of all, we have had a big casualty. The US has lost their Chaffee tank. It was a little bit ambitious, but up here if we look at the northeast part of the map, we get up here, US tried to send the Chaffee down the side here to perhaps take out this oil refinery. The Germans slid over their Panzer II, their light tank, managed to hit it twice. There was a quick exchange of fire, and the German firepower overwhelmed the Chaffee, taking it out of action and giving this unit a valuable experience point. Oh, likewise, in the Northwest, things have not gone that well for the US either, as the Panther made a long end run coming right up through here. And the disadvantage to this M10 tank killer is that it's kind of slow to react to that. And the US just didn't have enough kind of mobility to be able to deal with that. And so the Panther got up here. It is now put on a hit on the oil refinery. So US production capacity in the northwest part of the map looking in a little bit of trouble. Let's take a look at the southeast part of the map where things have gone better for the US forces. Towards here, the US have pushed up with some infantry into these woods. The woods give the infantry 1 armor point, which is actually helpful when going up against armor. This Stug here turned, fired into the woods, but missed completely, which actually gives these infantry forces some interesting options. They can be quite dangerous when attacking the sides of armored units, so we could have the potential to have them move up and attack the side, potentially taking out this Stug. Another option, even more dangerous perhaps, is to have them push past the Stug to try to make an end run for the base here. Now the Germans do have some infantry units here that could perhaps react to that. They might have to get their Tiger, but neither one of these 2 armored units are all that mobile. So the US have some particularly kind of potent threats here with these infantry formation up here. Likewise, the Sherman has pulled up to support this movement, combined arms. It put a hit on the Stug from the side. So this unit is under a bit of pressure, under a bit of pressure here, and it's been damaged. Southwest portion of the map, relatively a quiet sector of combat. The Tiger and this infantry have not had the capacity, just haven't had the time to move them forward. The US forces kind of pushed up a little bit. They're trying to take these woods here. That would give them a pretty good strong defensive position with this infantry, but this really hasn't been a theater of interest. It's been more the northern side of the map in this central area where things have really lit up. So now we're going to go forward and we're going to roll for initiative. Now, the prototype dice are a little bit tricky to see. In general, you're going to roll both sets of prototype dice, and whoever has the highest number of hits gets to go first. Just to simplify things and make it a little bit more visible, I'm just going to use a 12-sided die. That'll kind of make this section go a little bit faster. So the US is going to roll. They get a 1 for initiative. German rolls. They get a 9 for initiative. So for the first time, the German forces will have the initiative. And so now the question is, what do we want to do? I think we're going to have the Germans go first, but now we're going to roll for weather. The way the weather rolls is we're going to roll this dice, and here we got a 4. So the 3 is bad weather, and I think there's only 1 or 2 3s on the whole die. 3 is bad weather, which means it's snowy conditions. You're really limited to production stops, for example, and you only have 3 turns per side. 4 is moderate weather. No real impact on the terrain or on movement or anything like that. It means conditions are fair, and each side is going to get 4 flags, 4 turns in this phase. So let's set those up. So US gets 4 flags. We'll put these up in here, and this basically indicates that 4 units or formations, basically, infantry formation would be if there's more than 1 infantry unit in that infantry piece in that formation. So we'll put 4 in the US. We're going to do likewise to the German forces, and then it's the German forces' turn to act. We have a lot of options for the German forces, but I think the biggest threat here is right here in the center. We kind of need to deal with this infantry as the Germans. Another option would be to have our Panzer try to take out that oil refinery, but the infantry unit that's up there in the oil refinery isn't a great threat to the Panther because it's attacking its front. It could come in from the side, but then it would give up the production. So I think we can wait up there. I think the utmost priority to strike first is with our Stug 3 here to try to take out this infantry. So it's basically facing at it already, so it's going to activate. Now if we look over here at its card, so we can see that the Stug doesn't have any fuel, but fortunately it doesn't have to move or turn because that's okay. It's facing in the right direction. It's unloaded right now, so it's going to use its first action point to load the shell, and then it's going to use its second action point to fire it. A Stug 3 has 3 action points, a range of 2, and it uses the red die. So we're all good on those things there. However, our Stug needs both fuel and ammo to be anything other than a road obstacle after this one. Let's go back to the map and take a look. Now the way range works for armored units is you count the big hexes, so this isn't 1, 2, it's just a range of 1. So the infantry is in range. The Stug is going to fire at the infantry, and basically how many hits get through against infantry determine how many units are taken out. Now the Stug has that red die, which is the most powerful die that we talked about. So this could be an effective shot. However, we notice the infantry is in the woods, so they have 1 armor protection. So 1 hit is going to be negated. Let's see what the Stug does. Oh, very effective. It's tricky to see, but that's 3 hits. So 1 gets negated, 2 infantry units wiped out. That puts a huge hit on the US ambition to have those infantry units sneak around perhaps and take out the headquarters. All right, so we put a flag on the Stug to indicate they're done. Now it's the US turn to act. US forces are in a pickle now. I think what we're going to do, however, is try to weaken. I'm very concerned about this Panther up north here because it's actually not that far away from the headquarters here. It's a big threat and we don't have much up here to stop it. So I think we need to start dealing with that. So let's go figure out something we can do up here. If the Panther fires and hits 2 hits on the oil refinery, this infantry unit is taken out as well as the refinery. So I think what we're going to try to do is we're going to activate this infantry. We're going to move it 1 square here for 1 action point. Then it can attack the Panther on the side because it's not coming in from the front. Attacking it on the side for 1 action point. So it rolls the green die. Now, infantry is not super strong against the Panther, but the Panther has 0 armor on the side. We might get lucky and get 1 or 2 hits on it and start to weaken it. Oh, excellent. Those are 2 hits on the Panther. So we're going to come over and reduce the Panther's armor by 2. That's a huge help. We just need 1 more hit on it. Panther is reduced from 3 hit points down to 1. We've severely damaged it. So we drop a flag on this infantry to indicate that it's moved and it can no longer move for the rest of this phase. Now we go back to the Germans' turn. For the Germans' second turn, I'm not quite sure what to do, but we can leave the Panther for right now because this M10 doesn't have enough action points to get in a position to fire at it. We could move the Chaffee and bring this up, but I think we'll have time to do that in a little bit too, because this as well is safe from the N10 at the moment. So we can have some leisure towards the end of the turn. I think more urgency is down here. This Sherman will most likely fire, and it can most likely take out, not most likely, it has a pretty good chance firing at the side to take out this Stug. So we're going to be a little bit aggressive here. We're going to move our Tiger tank forward 1. Then we're going to use the second action point just to turn the turret to fire at this Sherman. I want to just turn the turret because right here is this M6, which is the American version of the strong tank. That can move up 1 and fire, hitting the Tiger from the side if we turn the whole hull. So we're just going to turn the turret for a second action point, and then we're going to try to take out this Sherman. We probably won't be able to take it out. It's got all 3 hit points, but we might be able to do some damage, especially considering that the Tiger tank, which is loaded up for armor and shells, has a very potent red die for its hit factor. So the Tiger is going to fire at the Sherman. Oh, 2 hits on the Sherman. So we're going to mark the Tiger as fired. That drops there. We put a flag on it. Let's go reduce the Sherman's armor, the Sherman's hit points. So Sherman hit points goes down to 1, significantly weakened. Still a threat, but less of a potent force there. If we look at the Tiger, it fired, which consumes its armor shell, and it uses 2 fuel, so it has no more gas. So we need to get fuel to the Tiger to get it moving. Both the Stug and the Tiger now are out of fuel, so that's a little bit problematic for our German armor here. Now it's the Allies' turn. I think the Allies need a morale boost here. This is a good shot here for this. Oh, the Sherman only has a movement of a range of 1. Oh, that's problematic. No, it's not. We're okay. We can move it forward a little bit here. We'll do that. Do we have enough capacity? Yes. Okay, so the Sherman's going to expend 1 fuel, move straight ahead, and fire with its... It has to reload? Yes, it needs to reload. So it reloads with its second action point, and it has 4, and then it's going to fire with its third action point. And once you fire, your turn is done. So it's going to fire at the Stug 3. It's going to use one of our 2 turns here, one of our 4 turns, or our second one now. And it fires, it uses, as the Sherman, it uses a yellow die, and the Stug has already been hit. It's been reduced to 2 hit points. Now we also should mark, I should note that the Stug, because it took out 2 infantry, also has 2 experience. I forgot to put that down before. So this would be a valuable experienced unit to take out. The Sherman fires, and it gets 2 hits on the Stug, which takes it out of action. A kill for our Sherman for the US. Stug goes off to the side. It loses all its hit points and everything that was in it. A big hit for the US forces, and it clears some space here. Now, if we zoom out here too, this is a potential threat here for the US, right? Because they could push forward right to the headquarters here. We've got an infantry unit, we've got the Tiger. Oh, this is interesting now. So a lot of possibilities here for the US. When we take a look at this Sherman, we're going to give it an experience point for taking out that tank, but it's already been hit badly. It's only got one hit point left. So it'd be nice to get a repair point up there to see if we could fix that, but it could still potentially push on. Lots of interesting situations. German's turn now. I think we're going to take this turn at the moment here and see if we can do something with the Panther up top. Very simple thing here for the Panther. It's just going to rotate its hull and then it's going to fire at that infantry. It will need to reload, so it's going to 1 action point to rotate, 2 action points to reload, and then a 3rd to fire. Now the Panther uses the yellow die. It only needs 1 hit point to take out that infantry, and it gets a 0. No hit points. So that does not bode well for the Panther up here. Okay, so let's go to the US turn. I think the chances of this infantry, we got so many things we could do as the US. We could have this infantry actually try to take out the Panzer II from the rear, which might work. We do need to move this M10 to somehow start dealing with that Panther in our backyard. We have the M6 here, which could take a shot at this Tiger tank, but it's not the greatest shot because you're firing right at the front of the Tiger, which has an armor of 2. So not the greatest opportunities there. Let's be a bit bold here. We're going to send this sole infantry squad, 1 to here, and it's going to attack the rear of the Chaffee. Now it uses a green die. The Chaffee's already been hit, so it's down to 2 hit points. We could get lucky here, and we might get a chance to see this infantry unit take it out. Oh, it gets 1 hit. Okay, a little tricky to see on the prototype dice. So it does damage the Chaffee. We'll reduce that one's, sorry, not the Chaffee, the Panzer II. It reduces it down to 1 hit point, and we'll drop a flag here for the US there. Each side now with 1 turn left to do something. Let's think about what we want to do for the Germans. So the German forces have a lot of options. We could try to get this Panzer II into action, but it doesn't actually have enough armored action points to take a shot at that infantry. We could push it forward to support the Panther, which wouldn't be necessarily a waste. We could have this infantry try to take out this infantry. However, I think just from a defensive standpoint, this Sherman creates problems. If it gets initiative first, next turn it can go 1, 2, turn, and fire on the headquarters, potentially knocking it out. Unlikely to get it, I think, on 1 turn, but possibly on 2 turns, which is game over. So we do need to deal with this threat of the Sherman coming down through our forces pushing right on towards the headquarters. With that in mind, I think what we're going to do here is push these infantry out of the woods into this open space as a 1. And then we're just going to leave them there, because if the Sherman stays there and we get initiative, we can go 1 and attack it. If it moves here, turns, and fires, we can move 1 here and attack it from the side. So we have a pretty good defensive option to negate that Sherman there. So that's what we're going to do with the German turn. It's not, infantry can only attack squares that it's adjacent to, so it could only attack into these here. It can't attack the Sherman because this little square is in the way. So that finishes the German turn here. Let's go to the Allies' last turn. For the US 4th action, we have a lot of options. We could have the M6 move forward and try to take out this Tiger. We could maybe even push up with this infantry here, which would probably help, but US forces are actually in a little bit of trouble right now. I think, however, we have to deal with this Panther up here, so let's go check out what we can do up here. All right, so this M10, it's a tank destroyer. It doesn't have a turret, so the hull and turret go together. Has action points of 3. I think we need to start getting to this one here. We're going to have it turn for 1, turn for 2, and then turn for 3. That means the next turn, if it gets initiative, it could move 1 and fire here right into the side of the Panther and finish it off potentially. I think that's a good reaction to what that Panther's doing. It does expose us a little bit for the east for the Panzer II tank, but I think it's going to take it a while for that to come up. And this tank's pretty strong too. So yeah, I think we're going to be okay with that move as the US. So we drop down our last movement flag here, and now we've finished the 4 turns of this phase for each side. All right, so now that we've finished the turns, we're going to do resupply. Let's do the German forces first. So the German resupply board looks like this. We've got 1 ammo shell in here. We've got 2 fuel. We've also produced 1, so that gives us a 3rd fuel for the Germans here. And we did spend some time to produce a rare repair point. So we're going to put the repair token down here. These are all in reserve, and now we can go allocate these to our forces right here. Although the repair point is done as part of a unit's move. It's not done during this resupply phase. But we've got 1 ammo shell, and let's take a look and see what we need to do with it. Looking quickly at the German units, we can see the Tiger has ammunition. The Panther does not have ammunition. It's got fuel, but it doesn't have ammunition. So we are going to put that shell onto the Panther tank so we can use it in the upcoming turn, next phase. Down here, the Panzer II as well still has 1 shell left. For fuel consumption, we actually have 3 fuel tokens left. And if we take a look up here, we can see that the Panzer II, which only uses 1, still has 2 left. That's our light tank, no problem. Stug, of course, is knocked out of action. If we come up and take a look at the Tiger and then the Panther has enough fuel for this turn, that's okay. The Tiger consumes 2 fuel and it has none. So let's give it some movement capacity by dropping its fuel down there. We'll take the extra 3rd one and drop it back down onto the supply board to save in our reserve. Now let's do the capacity for the German and see what we've produced. All German factories and production centers are up and running. We've got one, so we produce 1 fuel, 1 command point for this one here with the infantry is on, and then either a fuel or a command point with that one. So we're going to produce a command point for the moment because I think we might want to try to actually fix some of our units. So let's take 2 command points and 1 fuel and let's distribute them on the board. All right, so the fuel we can drop in for the next turn. I think we're going to need ammo for sure. So we're going to burn 1 token here to kind of produce 2 ammo for this upcoming next turn. And then, you know, our Panzer II's only got 1 hit point left. Our Panther's only got 1 hit point left. We do have this repair token that maybe we can use in this turn. I don't know if we have the time to be able to do that. Let's leave our other command point as a reserve for right now and not spend it. Let's take a look at the U.S. forces here. U.S. right now we have 2 ammo, 2 command points in reserve. I think we might want to build a tank with the U.S. forces here. And we have quite a bit of fuel. We have 3 fuel here as well in reserve. Let's go check what our armor forces needs are. So our M6 hasn't done anything. It's still got all its fuel. It's still loaded. It's basically just sat there for the whole war so far. We got to get that into action, right? M4 Sherman needs ammo. It's got gas. So we're going to take one of our ammo shells in reserve and drop it into the reserve for the Sherman so we can use it. Let's take a look at our next 2 units here. Our M10 is all good. It still likewise hasn't fired or consumed. Oh, actually, my bad. I forgot to remove the fuel that it consumed in the last turn. So it's down to 2 fuel, but that's okay. The Chaffee is knocked out of action. So we're going to leave that for the U.S. forces. We're going to leave that in reserve, what we've got right now. And we're pretty good. So let's go see what our production looks like now too. Production-wise, we have an oil refinery up to the north, which is producing as well. We're going to produce a command point here. We'll produce a command point there, and these are still at full strength. And we're going to produce some fuel up top. So we're going to have 2 command points and a fuel to be able to allocate on our board. All right, so we'll drop our fuel down there as a reserve for the next turn. And now we have 2 command points here. Now we've got 4. So I think what we can do here is I think we need reinforcements for the U.S. forces. I think that Sherman's going to get knocked out. We're actually going to put 3 down here and build a tank because I think by the time we get to the next turn, either our Sherman might be gone and we could rebuild that, or our Chaffee, we could rebuild that as a light tank. So we're going to do that. And then we only have 1 ammo left. We're probably going to need some ammo. Let's put our last point here on ammo. So we had a couple in reserve, and the most you can keep in reserve here is 5. So we're getting pretty close to having to spend them anyway. So the U.S. trying to build some armor capacity up here, and that brings us to the end of this turn. Now, neither side used cards in this turn, which could have created some different options and things like that, but we didn't use any cards here. So that's another element of play that's a single element of play that we haven't seen yet. That adds even more depth. It just didn't seem to quite make sense to use those in any of the situations that we had here. So just some thoughts on this game as we finish up this turn. Now we didn't see any card play, so that one didn't bring in. That adds another element. It just didn't seem to make sense given what we had to use those cards for this turn. You know, as we look at kind of the situation right now, this Sherman's probably going to get knocked out. I think this German infantry can take it. What we do with this Sherman as the Allies, you know, do we want to retreat to try to repair it? Do we want to push forward, try to take out the headquarters, or at least put some damage on the headquarters, then build another armored unit and push forward again? Pretty strong defense here, though, for the German with these 5 infantry units and the Tiger tank in front. We do have to activate this M6 and bring that to bear. That's been not necessarily well played, I think, by the U.S. forces here. Up to the north, Germans, of course, threatening with that Panther unit. Now that the M10 can act, this Panther's in a lot more dangerous situation, especially because it's got 2 hits on it. It's only got 1 hit point left. So it looks like We might be able to handle that. I think it might actually be worthwhile as the Germans. That miss on the infantry was huge, because I think what they can do now is just turn and try to take out that oil refinery before they get blown up, which would reduce the capacity of the U.S. forces. In a pretty good situation. I'd say right now it's advantage Germans, but the U.S. far from out of it. This could still go a lot of different directions. Let's take a moment now, and I'm just going to kind of offer some thoughts and impressions on the gameplay as I've experienced it so far. Final word, a lot to say. I'm going to try to go fast. This game showed up about 6:30 at night on a delivery on a Friday night. A friend was coming over at 7. We grabbed a bite to eat. We sat down about 7:30 and started playing it and learning it. 2.5 hours later, kind of learning, playing, slow, talking about other things, we both came to the conclusion it was a fabulous game experience. We really, really liked it. I came in with no preconceptions. I had no idea how the game was going to play, whether it was going to be any good, whether I was not going to like it or anything like that. I think for a very light rule set, it generates a very high amount of interesting decisions. And that's one thing I really look for in a game is, does it allow you to make fun decisions? And I think this game is loaded with that. For the complexity level that it has, the very modest and accessible complexity level, you've got production decisions. How are you going to spend your production points? Defending those production centers, trying to attack the enemy production centers. Do you go for the headquarters? Do you go for the production centers? Do you try to reduce enemy, just manpower and tanks? Lots of tactical decisions. I love the tactical and granular nature of the tank combat, turning hulls and turrets, figuring out range, trying to get shots in from the side and things like that. There's just a ton of decisions, and they're all fun. And it gets right up to it. You're going to start to play. The very first turn, things are going, and you're thinking. The developer mentions that he wanted to create a chess-like experience, and that did come into my mind as I was playing, because the sides are perfectly balanced. So it feels like a game in that sense where you're playing kind of this tactical level chess. I love as well the logistical layer of the game too, where you've got your production centers and you're worried about tanks running out of gas and armor. How do you spend those production points? And more examples of kind of the fun decisions that are in the game. So yeah, this really was going from something I knew nothing about. I was really happy with how much fun this game was. My friend and I both really liked it. We played again a week after that, another 2-player game, which was, I think, even more fun because now we had a better idea on what we were trying to do with the game. We made some mistakes the first time we played in terms of strategy and tactics that kind of like eye-openers for us. Like, don't underestimate infantry. They can really rip you apart if you leave them in the wrong place, or if you kind of don't pay attention to your enemy's infantry levels and stuff like that. Now, let's just talk for a quick second about who would like this game. If you're looking to get into wargaming, I think this is a great game because it's got a lot of different wargame type elements into it in a very accessible way. If you are a wargamer that's looking for a light complexity rule set that gives you a lot of fun decisions, I think you'll really enjoy this game. So I think this is a game that wargamers will enjoy as well. Now, if you're looking for an accurate tactical recreation of World War II combat, this is not your game, because this game's got a lot of abstraction. You're not going to play this game if you want to see how a Sherman is going to handle historically against a Tiger tank, for example. That's not what this game is about. It's kind of made a lot of abstraction to allow gameplay to get going fast and to make it accessible and fun. So I think that's not what you want to get with the game for here too. But those things aside, the last thing I want to mention, solitaire play. It comes with a solitaire scenario, and I think the developer mentioned he's building a few more of those maybe. I really enjoyed playing both sides here in this demo. This is the first time I've done that. My only experience with the game up to now was 2-player. So I think it's very playable, solitaire, and I thought it might be a little bit too easy tactically to do that, but I didn't find that at all. I really enjoyed the solitaire experience playing both sides here too. So I think if you're looking for a solitaire game that's got a lighter rule set, this would be another game for you. One last word, I've seen some comparisons of this game to Company of Heroes. I don't think those hold up because I think the mechanics are very different. This feels on a scale that's going to play fast and you're getting right into the action. So although it's a similar themed game and visually it may look like Company of Heroes, the gameplay I think is, from what I know of Company of Heroes, the gameplay feels a lot different. All right, final word, thumbs up. This is this publisher's first game. I did not know what to expect. I was thinking, like, am I going to like it? But yeah, enthusiastic thumbs up. I think this is a strong game. My friend and I both really enjoyed playing it. I think it's got, for a modest and accessible rule set, it's got a lot of deep and fun gameplay. It's really, you can pull a lot out of this, challenges you, it's quick, it's fast, Yeah, it's just a good game. I mean, it's just a fun game to play. So I'm sure it's going to be the type of game that gets to the table a lot. It's not going to be the type of game that you buy and let it sit on the shelf. It's accessible and fun. So yeah, big thumbs up, and I hope you enjoyed it if you get it. And I will put a link down to the Kickstarter down below. Let me know as well in the comments what you think, and if you have any questions about the gameplay, I can try to answer them. So thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll see you again soon.